a period of time in my life where that was pretty much the only way I could interact with another person. Was is there? I mean, I can't remember. Is there cursing allowed on the podcast?
Fuck yeah. we check
right.
off the explicit box, baby.
Yeah. The only way that I could interact with another person was if I was drunk or if I was fucked up, and that was a lot of my teenage years.
Yeah.
And then, coming out of that, I got sober pretty young, and my social skills disappeared again. I think there's a lot of people who, if they have a period of their life where they're really super reliant on whatever it is they're doing, I'm sure it's very similar across the board. That is the way that they interact through society. And then when that goes away, you're just kind of left you're back at ground zero. Yeah. It's like you're a 9-year-old again.
Absolutely.
And then spending a lot of years in that. And then since then, I'm in my 30s. I run a business, and I worked a bunch of years in the restaurant industry, which, like, having to interact with people is very scary to go into.
Yeah.
But then treating that just like something you have to learn how to do has been awesome for me, and especially for because I think there was a lot of years where it was very easy for me to interact with people who I was already close to, but like anything outside of that, it was very difficult.
Now, I mean, with Milk Cult, like who ends up doing a lot of the kind of outward facing stuff with the press, you or Patrick? Is it both of you?
So that ends up being me for a lot of the stuff. If we have interviews or stuff to talk about our company, it'll be both of us, but we both spend time in the kitchen. Patrick handles, he's like, when we go into work in the kitchen, he's my boss. And then when we go out to do events or plan, some kind of outward facing event, I'm his boss. Mm-hmm. And it's a really good dynamic. Nice. And I didn't start doing this because I actually wanted that job, but that had to be somebody's responsibility. And I was like, okay, I guess I need to learn how to do this.
Circling back, what part did surfing play in how you related to people and how you were able to kind of communicate? Did that help at all? Or did that kind of just was there? I don't know. Like sometimes I feel like when I meet other surfers, it's just, and it's particularly in a place where there aren't a lot of other surfers, there's this common shared experience. And so it makes it a little bit easier to kind of communicate, or you always have something to kind of talk about at least.
Oh yeah. It can be this kind of connection point where, if I'm somewhere and I find out somebody in the room like surfs and like really surfs, like it doesn't even have to be like they're the best in the world, but if they're really into it, then we have an hour's worth of stuff to talk about. And, but in particular, outside of a social aspect, really, really committing to surfing and being able to surf some places that are a little more sketchy or bigger waves, like when I was living in Indonesia, getting to surf like a couple big wave spots and being able to do some stuff that I think that I would have never categorized myself as a person who would be able to do those things. Mm-hmm. And then being able to go and do them kind of, and this was in my mid 20s. So like, not even like super young, kind of changed how I looked at myself as a person who is able to do things, which is really cool. Like if you grow up and your own self-image is just a person who, and I think this is also because like I spent so many years, like I fucked up in school, I fucked up with my life, and creating this idea of myself as somebody who's, man, you've really messed up, there's not a lot for you. And then having surfing being this thing where like, oh, wow, you can really go do these things. It was very cool. And it was one of the first outward reflection things in my life where I had a real big confidence boost. And that was cool. I'm sure that there's some people who like confidence can be like a toxic thing. But for me, in that point in my life, it was actually really nice.
How did you end up going to Indo and how long were you there? That must have been pretty
Oh,
sweet.
so I was in, I mean, I was at high school working catering and other jobs. And then I went to community college and just like worked over the years. And, my dad is a physicist. A lot of people in my family are really well educated. So for me, like being in community college, like everybody was super nice. No one gave me shit about it, but it was just kind of this thing where like, man, I really have to go finish school. But I finished college, but like studying abroad was not really an option. So this was in like 2008, 2009. And I wanted to find somewhere where there would be waves where I could get a job, because it was like I could save $1,000, but I don't know if I could save more than that. And so I got a work visa to live in Indonesia, and I moved to Bali in 2010. And I was there for a summer, and then I came back, and then I was there for a year and some change, living in Denpasar and working in Denpasar and working on the Bukit Peninsula. So I learned Indonesian,
Bahasa.
and I had a job teaching.
Bahasa Indonesian, huh?
Yeah,
Sedikit.
berbahasa sedikit, yeah.
I forgot. It's been so long.
My bahasa is pretty rusty at this point. It's been like 10 years, but like my bahasa was really good at one point. So I was teaching in Denpasar, and I was tutoring on the Bukit to Russians. So I was teaching English to Russians and English to Indonesians. And there wasn't the major influx of Russians there yet, but there was enough to need some tutoring.
There's a crew, from what I've read, and a Long Island surfer, Toby Smith, had got a job and was living there and like basically giving tours to all the wealthy Russians on surf trips and stuff. Like, they throw that money around, huh?
Thing. It's like, the Russian petroleum money on the Bukit, buying up 99-year leases and opening up like crazy hotels.
Wow.
But it was really, I don't know, it was really cool, because the first time I went there, it was still pretty sleepy. And then when I was living there, it was right before social media and Instagram and all that stuff started to really take off. So it was just before, like, I think the Bukit Peninsula really blew up and a lot of stuff like that. And
the Bukit,
for better or worse,
Bukit had blown up already. Like, I was there in 2004, and it felt like, I was like, what is this, Disneyland? What are these stairs here? You're not supposed to have stairs. It's supposed to be a ladder, and it's supposed to be rough. And you're supposed to, I was like, oh, this was ruined for me almost already. Right? Like, you show up and you watch Morning of the Earth, and and then you go there, you're like, oh. But it's still a sick wave.
It's like, I remember going to this place, Pantai Timbus, umbrellas, and like you could surf there like every day of the week by yourself and never see anybody. And then I went back. Last time I was there was in 2015, maybe.
Yeah.
And there was a literal like villa on the beach where like everything used to be just like rock stairs. And I was like, I mean, for some people, they feel like, oh, that's, it's good and bad, depending on who you ask. For some people, that's like, hey, that's jobs, that's development. And then for some people, it's a loss of a way of life. And I'm not one to say who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah. It's from good comes bad, and from bad comes good, and who's to say what's good and bad, and that's definitely, for I'm sure there are some people who grew up there and are quite happy with the progress, and some who aren't, and it's interesting watching it, but man, that's awesome. So where were you living? Like, what part? Like, were you living in Denpasar, or were you living out in the Bukit, or moving around?
So I was living in Denpasar. So you
had a place there.
I was living in Denpasar, this place. Yeah, I had a kos it's on Jalan Satelit, which is like just like really central Denpasar, which is just west of Renon, and that's where my work was too. So I'd work most days from like 9 to 3 or 10 to 5. And then if I got off work early enough, I would usually go surf east side somewhere. And all the breaks in between Sanur Reef down to Hyatt Reef, or and then I'd go up north. There's a couple spots around Karamas. Like they hadn't built the hotel there yet, so there still are some pretty sleepy spots up there. But like everything, it just gets crowded, more and more crowded year after year. So I mostly surf east side a lot, and which is really nice because it's not as consistent there. But if you get the wind right, like the waves are just as good. Especially at like Sanur Reef and some of the other places.
God, yeah, I miss it. It was so nice. It was like best 3 months of my life there. It's like, did you get to travel much through Indonesia at all, or did you stay mostly in Bali? Did you get to go around some of the other islands?
A tiny bit. I mean, like most of the time I had work, so like during the year I couldn't travel much. But then, when I wasn't working or in school, I did, a trip out to Timor, and then a friend of mine who was living there at the time, actually. So I injured my foot on like a motorbike, weekend thing. A friend came to visit, and I was just being.
Did yours get infected as well?
I scraped. All right, so I scraped This was really dumb because I've been living there. I scraped my foot. And I cleaned it, and I was like, oh man, it'll be fine. And I broke my number one rule, which is like, I didn't like clean it every day. And my foot blew up. It looked like a turkey stuffed in a bag. And my friend was like, dude, we got to go to the hospital. And I was like, no, it'll probably be fine. It'll be fine. And then finally he convinced me to go to the hospital. And the doctors like carved a big hole out of my foot. And they said, they're like, if you came here 12 hours later, we'd have to chop your foot off. So I had to lay up for a week just to like let my foot heal and like the swelling to come down. And that was the year that Google Earth had just gotten like really, really good.
So you were checking out
2009 or 10. So I checked out some spots in Java, and I convinced my friend Jake. I was like, hey, we should just buy some plane tickets we didn't have money to like book like a tour or anything. So we just bought some plane tickets to Java, waited for my foot to heal. And then I think we didn't even download a map. We just like wrote down the name of the piece of forest that we wanted to go to. We flew into Jogja, and then I'll send you some pics, but like we basically just like drove around Java for 10 days asking, hey, like, do you know how to get to this place? And like, it would take like every 6 hours, somebody would be like, go this way, because we didn't have cell phones or maps or anything. We just was like, drive until you can ask somebody a question. And we literally just like found this place. It didn't have a name at the time. I've since seen it in like a surf magazine or two, but basically we found this spot in central Java and just like camped on the beach for 4 days and surfed this big reeling left by ourselves for like 4 days straight. And I think once we'd been there for 3 days, one guy showed up and he just was like, how'd you find out about this place? And we're like, oh, we just saw it on a map and thought there might be surf here. And he was like, okay, cool. Don't ever tell anyone. I was like, okay, cool. Like we will like not mind.
Folks, we'll post that on Instagram, the GPS coordinates, and
with the geo tag.
We'll put a little Yelp map right there and leave a review. And it's funny. It's like a similar thing happened to me. Like I got into a little motorbike accident and scraped my foot and thought I cleaned it enough and didn't really pay attention to it and ballooned up. Luckily, it was a nurse who was hanging in the warungs, and she like helped me get the right meds and got me all good. And then a guy drew a map on a napkin of a spot in Sumatra, and he's like, here. And I just did the same thing, basically. No real map, no photos, no nothing. And it's like, miss those days, don't you?
It's very interesting because that literally, you cannot do that anymore. It's like, luckily with the advent of like always having a smartphone,
Mm-hmm.
Google Maps,